So what does it mean to have an expanded aura or open chakra? Well, let's do them one by one. An open chakra means you can take in more information. If your heart is open, you can actually feel more love. If your heart chakra is closed, you actually cannot, which is a very interesting phenomenon. If you've ever noticed somebody giving love to you or you offering love to somebody else, taking away all the psychological dynamics, you can actually notice whether or not that love is felt based on how somebody responds. If you think for a second about the topic that you loved most in the world, the person, the pet, the experience, and you pause, see if you can feel, and just imagine a green circle opening around your heart. See if you can really feel that as if it were happening now, as if that scenario, that being were with you and all was well. Can you feel the love of that moment? If you can, that's what love feels like. Love is energy, is information, is the essence of many things, if not all things, and your ability to feel it depends on how open your heart chakra is. Now, think of that thing, but imagine that green circle closing and clenching. If you do this, you've actually closed temporarily your heart chakra, then that thing you're thinking about, that puppy, that person, it's more of an idea. So this is a very interesting concept in spiritual anatomy. Why do people like doing psychedelics? Why do people like using plant medicines or like using drugs? Because it forces all the stuff open. It forces us to feel things that we otherwise might not have been able to or have the courage to feel. It floods our system with dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, depending on the compound, so we feel good enough that being as open as we are, if we look at a past hurt, our system is feeling so good that that hurt or that memory doesn't really hurt us anymore. Maybe we're guided or have the insight or strength to heal that memory or whatever it is that caused the hurt, or that thing in us that made the relationship of hurt from the cause and effect, childhood trauma, rejection, whatever it could have been. But when psychedelics are being used, you're flooded with so much positive stuff that you're actually able to both feel more and feel better. And because you feel better, it helps you learn how to heal yourself. The danger, of course, is that in being so open, it can bring a lot of things to the surface. So to use a concrete example, I'm going to make a person, call her Shelly, and say Shelly had an abusive mother growing up. Shelly maybe has seen some psychologists about this, doesn't talk to her mother too much right now, but when things remind her of that type of abuse, it's really tough and maybe there's some PTSD there. So when Shelly uses psychedelics, what could happen is maybe she could feel good enough and get enough support to hold loving awareness for the soul that was in the body and using the mind that her mother did, and notice that maybe her mother was hurt herself and just passing on an energy and not trying to cause harm, or maybe not. And maybe because the awareness is expanded and the chakras are expanded and the access to time and space and memory is expanded, that trauma could actually be relived and felt worse. This is what's called a bad trip, where you focus on something in a negative way with a negative tinge. Negative is just connotation of suffering in this context. And it feels crappy and it feels bad and it feels really bad and it's magnified, because psychedelics and plant medicines and drugs can magnify things. So especially using these things for healing, this is why it's good to have a great space with cleansing and prayers and guides and elders. Which I've had a few times, and it's really wonderful. And sure, you can learn what they do and how they do it and do it for yourself, but maybe not always from a video or an article or a book alone. It's sometimes great to have that embodied experience. If you're learning how to do heart surgery, it's probably good to witness 100 or even 1,000 heart surgeries in person to really understand the mechanics and what not to do. And chakras are organs. Chakras are parts of your system. Memories are parts of you and parts of who you are. And if you were literally intending to do a healing on yourself under an influence of a substance which changes your perceptions, I hope it's getting through to you how significant and serious this stuff is, even though it's powerful. So what does it mean to resource yourself in ways that plant medicines can enrich you, but not need the plant medicine? Well, think about dancing while under the influence of alcohol. Very, very common example in society. We want to dance, we feel a little bit like people might judge us or not comfortable in our own bodies, or self-conscious, we have a drink or two, we loosen up, we go dance, we have fun. There's dopamine release from the alcohol, there's a bunch of other stuff that happens, and in most cases like that, it's okay. Taking away extreme cases are people who have bodies or psychologies where that's a very bad decision. So what can happen with the plant medicine? Well, maybe you want to connect. Let's find a wonderful source of love. Maybe you want to connect with just the essence of love as an abstraction, however it's represented. Actually, let's use Jesus. Let's take away all religious connotations and just say Jesus was a being who was able to live in and express extremely wonderful, huge amounts of love. Let's take away all the other stuff that society and different languages and politics and organizations added on top of that, and say you want to connect with this being that maybe you don't know very well, but just like we talked about divinities earlier, connect with this loving source that is known as Jesus, or Mary Magdalene if you prefer. And so you're trying to connect with Jesus, or you could say Christ consciousness, and you feel that you're able to, but it's not very clear. If you had good spiritual guidance, you might be able to, and you might have a lot of support. But if you have a lot of mushrooms, or a lot of a psychedelic, or a lot of MDMA, or a lot of something else in your system, you might find it much easier because your awareness is expanded, your intent is clear, and that being, who still exists in many forms, can notice that, even though they would notice you anyway, but you can notice them more because your system is open, your third eye is open, you can perceive more, your heart is open, you can feel more, and your seventh chakra is open, so your connection with the divine and your inner divine is more open. So is it easier to connect with Jesus on plant medicine for most people, or the essence of love? For better or for worse, it may be. However, that doesn't mean it's the only way, or the best way, or the way you have to. But what you can do constructively for your benefit, if you have already made the choice, or plan on already making the independent choice for yourself to use these types of substances with all the previous disclaimers, is you can say, wow, I'm in this expanded, enhanced state. I haven't taken too much. I still have my discernment. I would like to build the ability to connect with the loving presence that is known as Jesus, as Mary Magdalene. So you reach up, in whatever way you reach up or you pray, you connect with that essence, and you feel it, and you notice it, and you bring it in, and you have a relationship. Maybe a dialogue, maybe it's just energy, maybe you feel really wonderful, maybe something else happens. Maybe there's a healing related to the history of those beings if you grew up with hearing words related to them that led to suffering, who knows? I wish everybody all the healing they want related to these topics. And what can happen if you're lucid enough and didn't have too much of these things in your system is you actually can be aware and cognizant of what's coming in, of what this relationship and connection to Jesus, to Mary Magdalene is. So that when your system has cleaned itself out of the psilocybin, of the cannabis, of the whatever, you have enough memory, your hippocampus was online enough during the experience, you're like, oh, I know what that's like, let me try again. And it may not feel identical because your biochemistry is different and there's a lot of other variables in this day compared to that other day. But with enough work and experience and training, you can feel and get access to all of the abilities and all of the perks and all of the benefits that plant medicines offer you while you're no longer using them. And this, I feel, is one of the best benefits of plant medicines for those of us who choose to use them, is being exposed to higher elements of the spiritual realms and being able to get familiar enough with them to know ourselves with them. For example, if you've ever had a very clear intuition and you just have a voice in your head which is still and consistent and says this is the next thing to do, and you follow that voice and you take that action and it leads to something really, really good or beneficial for you, even if there is suffering in the middle. And you're like, okay, that voice is my intuition. I've had enough experience with that voice that I know the difference between that voices and, say, voices of fear, voices of ego, voices of a personification of a parent or a person in your past who might have troubled you somewhat. And you know your intuition from following it and things turn out well, and not following it and things don't turn out so well. Let's say you use a plant medicine and your sense of intuition is much clearer and much expanded, and what you're able to achieve and get is huge. For example, I was at the Oregon Eclipse Festival last year. I wanted to see some good friends. I had no idea where they were. I got really still and open. I was microdosing on psilocybin, and I just had this knowing, go that way, go up the hill, stop. Go that way, stop. Go that way for 40 paces, stop. And after doing that 7 or 8 times, I ended up at this really cool tent with these beautiful herbal elixirs and teas, and I saw 5 friends there, including people that I really wanted to see, and I had no idea were at the festival. Now, that's cool intuition, that's cool tracking, that's a cool ability of locating things across space and time called dowsing. There's people who do that professionally. And I had no conscious idea that would happen. I only had the intent. And my expanded intuition helped me achieve that intent and manifest that much more quickly. However, I was lucid enough, because I was only microdosing, that I was able to realize here's the feeling of being in tune with and aligned with my intuition. And so now, if I go to a festival or anywhere else, I can get into that frequency without plant medicine, and the experience in the translation of the new day can be repeated.